Welcome, dear audience, cultured and knowledgeable, to this space where we don't just chew on reality, but spit it out with a touch of sulfuric acid so that hypocrisy shines through. If you were expecting a lukewarm summary, the kind that sounds like it was dictated by a public relations office that smells like copal, you were wrong. Wrong channel. Get ready, because today we're going to break down how the system is biting its own tail. And believe me, does it taste like betrayal and stolen oil? If you thought Scherer's book was just about settling scores, get ready. Because here we're going to dive deep into the real civil war that's being fought within the guts of the Fourth Transformation. Hold on tight, because today's topic has a taste of betrayal that even Judas would envy. Let's dive into this swamp of cronyism and misdirection, courtesy of the man who was once the legal architect of the promised paradise. Get ready, take out your political baking soda, because this is going to hurt. Let's see how the system is evolving, from the narrative of purity to the harsh reality. Or in other words, the chronicle of a confession at the heart of the palace. Let's get to it. It's not the opposition, ladies and gentlemen. It's not an invention of the neoliberals who miss their caviar privileges. What we have on the table today is not an external attack. It's a self-dissection. The Mexican political system, the one that promised to purify itself with holy water and courageous honesty, is accusing itself in front of the mirror and the mirror. By the way, his last name is Scherer, Julio Scherer Ibarra. He's not just anybody, not an uncomfortable journalist looking for a viral tweet. He's the man who was in the kitchen, the one who saw how the onion was chopped, and who put the poison in the stew. As former legal advisor to the presidency, Scherer was the legal architect, the operator in the shadows, the one who turned political whims into laws and decrees, son of the legend Scherer. Garcia. Julio didn't come to power by chance. He grew up in it, accompanying the jackass from Macuspana, López Obrador, for decades, not months. That's why, when someone who was the right-hand man writes a book that seems more like a legal file than a memoir, what collapses is not a career, but the moral narrative of the regime. If you thought the presidential spokesperson was only in charge of making sure the microphone didn't have any echo, Scherer brings us other facts in this book, which is shaking the foundations of Moreno. The name that appears as the villain in a spy novel is Jesus Ramirez Cuevas, also known in the underworld of the filthiest politics as El Bañagatos. But don't get it wrong, they don't show him as merely a communicator. Scherer points him out as the ultimate operator, the man who decided which truths were fabricated and which sins were buried. The most serious part, and this is where the sarcasm turns chilling, is the suggested connection with fuel theft networks and illegal campaign financing. Yes, that same dirty money they swore no longer existed in the new politics. But perhaps more than one person is asking, why speak up now? Well, it's because of something called the timing of survival. Because you might also wonder, why didn't Mr. Julio say anything when he was sitting in his office at the palace? Very simple, because back then the old man Juango had total control. Was speaking up political suicide? Scherer speaks today because the situation has changed, the bastard is gone, López Obrador is no longer officially in office. But he left his watchdogs embedded in Claudia Sheinbaum's new government. Scherer knows that outside of Mexico, especially in the land of hamburgers, and with the FBI files, the investigations are moving forward. Speaking out now isn't about revenge, it's a life insurance policy. In other words, I saw it, but I wasn't the one who signed, which paves the way for the cursed legacy of the welfare maid. And this is where the plot gets interesting. For the current administration, Claudia Sheinbaum finds herself in a dilemma that not even all her doctorates can easily solve. Option A, investigate Jesus Ramirez and break with the sacred past. Option B, remain silent, protect the operators from the previous administration, and inherit all the corruption. Although everything seems to indicate that we all know which option the lady without dignity will choose. Every day that Ramirez Cuevas remains at the heart of power, it's not a sign of continuity, it's a sign of complicity. Scherer's bomb is already on the table. Now we have to see if Claudia tries to defuse it, or if she decides to sit on it and see if it doesn't explode. The slogan, "We are not the same," has received a coup de grace from inside the bunker. Scherer documents that the power which promised to clean up the system ended up repeating the same practices of the past, but with a coating of popular slogans. Characters linked to illegal money, palace intrigues, and an internal war between the purists, that is, the radicals of rhetoric, and the negotiators, meaning the real operators. That is what really moved the country. If you thought the book Neither Revenge Nor Forgiveness by Julio Scherer Ibarra was just a diary of nostalgia, you're more lost than an opposition member at a Morena assembly? What Scherer gives us is a roadmap of how the tamal rotted from the inside, confirming that in the fourth transformation talent is optional, but blind obedience is mandatory. Scherer confirms what we all suspected while watching the news. The criteria for governing was the famous 90% loyalty, 10% ability. Alfonso Durazo was chosen to lead security not for his policing expertise, but for his unwavering loyalty. Ana Gabriela Guevara, whose time at CONAID is described as disastrous. But there she is, untouchable, like a relic. Olga Sanchez Cordero in the Ministry of the Interior. Is it just for the political gender quota? Manuel Bartlett, the great Bartlett. According to Scherer, his arrival at the Comisión Federal de Electricidad was a mistake that's costing us a fortune. But pay attention here, because this is where things get complicated. Scherer, as I already mentioned, hits the sore spot about Jesus Ramirez Cuevas. According to the former advisor, Ramirez Cuevas, he was the matchmaker who introduced Sergio Carmona Angulo, also known as the King of Huachicol, into Morena's structures. Yes, the same one who was executed in New York Mafia style, in Nuevo León. He not only introduced him to Mario Delgado to finance governors' campaigns, but even took him to meet López Obrador himself. What a way to sweep the stairs from the top down. It seems that in the process they forgot to pick up the dirty money that came with the broom. If that wasn't enough, do you remember the lifetime compensations for the former workers of Luz y Fuerza del Centro? They sold it to us as a heroic act of justice. Scherer says that Nane was a political operation. Electoral loyalties with public money. The little joke left us with a liability of 27 billion pesos, which we will be paying off until the year 2086. With that, 150 hospitals could have been built. But of course, hospitals don't vote or make noise at Clara Brugada's rallies. In other words, Scherer's paid applause machine also exposes the petty cash used to set up that propaganda machine we love so much. Irregular contracts and payments to propagandists and operators. The end of the story is worthy of a mafia movie. Scherer describes how, after his departure, the pack at the Attorney General's office was unleashed, with Hertz Monero acting as the enforcer of personal vendettas. The most cynical part was the warning from Andrés Manuel himself. When you leave the government, they will come after you. The classic "I told you so" from a boss who knows exactly what kind of monsters he fed under his desk. Without a doubt, we are witnessing the total fracture of the group in power. It's no longer a suspicion, it's a public bloodbath. The relationship at the top of power during López Obrador's 6-year term was divided into two facets. Julio Scherer Ibarra, the advisor, the friendly mediator in charge of tricky matters, talking to businessmen and making sure storms didn't sink the ship. Jesus Ramirez Cuevas, who played as the shadow of power, that figure who took hold of the leader's spirit to sow hatred and create a narrative of purity while operating from the shadows. Here things get even worse because it turns out that the King of Huachicol, the one I already mentioned, Sergio Carmona, not only financed campaigns, he recorded everyone. It is mentioned that at his house in San Pedro Garza Garcia, Morena candidates had to go pick up suitcases full of cash. The result? A very large collection of videos and recordings that are now in the hands of his widow, Perla McDonald. Claudia Sheinbaum is currently caught in a curious dilemma. On one hand, her historic commitment not to betray her boss, the one who put her there, the old man, wet pants. And on the other hand, the reality of a government that, in true Godfather style, makes her offers she can't refuse. La Chachis lives under a regime where her own people are the main creators of problems. To top it all off, inevitably, all this leads us to foreign policy, while Mexico plays at sending food packages to Cuba to help, without making it obvious. Washington, with Marco Rubio and Donald Trump at the forefront, is regaining control of the Caribbean. The warning is clear. The United States is not going to allow any lifelines to the Cuban regime. And Mexico is being left in an unsustainable position, which contradicts its own interests in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. In short, what Scherer has uncovered is not a sewer, it's an ocean of contradictions that is drowning the narrative of not lying, not stealing, and not betraying. What's in that book is a bomb. It's not just gossip, it's the death certificate of a narrative that can't be sustained even with all the other facts in the world. The system is confessing, and what it's telling us is that power, no matter its color, is always hungry for the same things. They have it. The situation isn't something made up by conservative people. It's the confession of the man who was breathing down the neck of that bastard Lopez Obrador. The system is devouring itself, and the smell of burning can no longer be hidden. Not even with morning incense. I'll step away and check how many virtual hospitals are being built now with the millions lost to political fuel theft. Don't forget that power brings out the best and the worst in everyone. And in this case, it seems like the inventory of the worst is pretty well stocked. Right? It hurts, but sarcasm helps to digest it. See you on Friday. Remember that you can make your donations via PayPal. You can find the information in the comments section. Thanks to you, this channel stays active. It's very important to subscribe, like, and hit the bell to receive notifications whenever there's new content. Thank you.